South Asian Heritage Month 2021. So this is the second year South Asian Heritage Month has been running in the UK. So to celebrate that, I thought, it'd be great if video games could have a presence and represent not only the people who make them, but the next generation of people who can continue to make them. So thank you to everyone who is joining in at home. Maybe it is your last day of school. So thanks for joining us instead of, running wild and getting your friends to draw on your t-shirt or, doing pranks in the classroom. For those of you at home, thanks for joining us as well. Maybe your parents are getting an hour off so they can relax a little bit, or maybe they will be joining in the background and listening to all the different possibilities the video games can offer young people. So if you would like to, you are welcome to use the hashtags. So hashtag South Asian Heritage Month or hashtag I am POC in Play. And whichever channel you are joining us on, whether it's BAFTA Games or POC in Play or, Yuki's, please feel free to drop any questions into the comments. Dom from Yuki will be watching them and feeding any pertinent questions and queries coming through, and we'll either answer them in real time or answer them at the end. So as a little bit of an introduction, hi, my name is Dr. Satish Shewhorak. I'm a senior lecturer in games animation at Teesside University, and I also volunteer helping a little bit with POC in Play, which is an organization that's dedicated to improving visibility and representation and awareness of not just South Asian people, but also Black and ethnic minority people in the UK, and also a little bit more broadly. So if any of you joined, or maybe you joined with parents and teachers, and they're kind of thinking, well, why should we consider video games? That's just a thing that you while away your Saturday or Sunday. I used to spend 6 hours playing Street Fighter 2. Maybe now it's more Roblox or Minecraft. Maybe it seems like a waste of time. It's just a bit of a doss around. However, in reality, if you've not already heard, it's actually a major industry. And as a global industry, gaming has now easily surpassed movies and music as an entertainment format. So just a couple of years ago, it reached past £107 billion in global revenue in terms of the games industry. And that's compared to about £31 billion for movies and £15 billion of music. So you can imagine over lockdown, as people have been gaming even more and more, that figure has probably only risen more and more. So it is a serious industry, not just about playing and having fun. And, when we consider, well, how many of us are in the industry are South Asian? So Yuki, who have helped and coordinate part of this event, have also worked with academic researchers like myself to do a census, and they found, maybe not too surprising in the UK, that most people are probably white. But when I last looked, it looked like about 6% Asian, which sounded all right. It's about 7% of South Asian people in the UK. But when I spoke to the researcher, it seemed to be more like 2 or 2.5%. So there's a big difference. And I can see it with friends in the industry. I don't see as many South Asian people. And particularly when you compare it to young people in primary and secondary school, that's probably more like 10% of kids in primary and secondary school are South Asian. So there's a really big gap and a really great potential for greater representation within the workforce. And hopefully you guys will be the next generation of people to increase those numbers and get a bit closer to the reality of at least the UK. And as an academic researcher myself, I've also been working with Teesside University as well as Yuki to do a really big 10-year study of the last 10 years of blockbuster and indie video games. And unfortunately, it seems like over the last 10 years in the top 100 every year, there have been no best-selling big games with a South Asian leading playable character, which is really unfortunate. And the only indie game, critically acclaimed indie game that we were tracking was with a South Asian leading character was Raji. So really what I'm trying to say is hopefully by increasing the number of people who can enjoy working in the games industry from a South Asian background, hopefully we'll see more and more characters representing ourselves as well. And that meant that game I mentioned there is Raji, an Ancient Epic. So that is available on all platforms, Switch and Xbox and PC. And just as an incentive, the person with the best question in the comment section will be awarded a copy of the game. So as we talk to the panelists, stockpile some great questions, put them in the comments, and we shall ask them, and hopefully you'll win a copy of this game. And so if you're interested, well, is this an industry worth getting into? It's also, pretty well paid. So the average UK wage is about £42,000, which is about £10,000 more than the average across the whole of the UK. And you can see there's different amounts across different areas of the UK. It's not all solely in London. You can work anywhere from London to Scotland and still find great companies to work in. And also you can kind of see a scale up there. And I'll share these slides afterwards to see you can really earn great money as you go on. And so without further ado, I'll instead of talking about the industry and all that kind of stuff, I'll just get on to introducing our panelist for today. Once we've done that, we can start to ask some questions. So first up, I would like to introduce Khaya Ahmed. So we're really, really pleased to have her joining us from Pakistan. So I think there's a little bit of a time difference and a much bigger temperature difference. So hopefully her internet doesn't melt and we can still hear her. If not, I'll have to put on her voice and do my best impression of her as she puts it into the chat. But Khaya is amazing games developer. Not only was she a consultant for the awesome Ms. Marvel series and soon to be a TV series from Marvel, she's also been a writer on Lucid Games in Liverpool. They released a PS5 exclusive game, Destruction Allstars, recently, and she's a senior game designer in her own right. I'd also like to introduce Zakia Abdullah. She is a character artist. She's worked on some amazing games as well, at different studios as well. So it's not like you need to just work at one studio for the rest of your life. Some people work freelance. So she's worked on games like Sea of Thieves, another great British, video game. Also like to introduce Robin, really interesting games designer. You can see the top of the screen waving. And she is a games developer. So in my mind, she has some great skills in terms of not just design, but technical implementation as an indie games designer. And we can talk about that a little bit, the differences where you get a little bit more creative freedom to make more interesting games, hopefully. Also like to welcome Anantha. He's a programmer at Coconut Lizard. So he'll hopefully enlighten us about the dark art of programming and hopefully not scare us off with all the maths and physics. And we'll also welcome John Nejady. He's a senior producer at Lockwood Publishing. So he has a long history of work on some amazing games from Just Dance and Watch Dogs. And I believe he worked on, Sea of Thieves as well, which is a huge game. So it'll be really great to hear a little bit from the business side. And talking about business side as well, we're also blessed with Charlotte Rouget-Murphy. She's a marketing manager at SEGA Europe, at least for this week or next. She may be moving on to fresher pastures, but so by day she's a marketing manager. She helps get these games noticed, and by evening she streams the video games, which I'm sure many of you will all be a fan of. So I'll just move back to, let's say, Robin. And I'll ask the first question, I guess. So, Robin.
Hello.
Hey. So I'll ask the first question. So, what you make some really interesting, really unique and different types of games. What different types of games or experiences do you want to see more of? Like, we've got lots of shooters and aliens coming down, but what kind of experiences would you like to see more of over time?
I really love story-heavy games, and it'd be really lovely to see South Asian protagonists and characters in those games. So, for example, I believe there's a game coming out that's called Venba, and it looks gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Very excited for it. I think you can wishlist it on Steam. It'd be nice to have games that explore the nuance and the multifaceted aspects of being South Asian, rather than just placing us as the monolith. Aside from South Asian representation, I love games with mechanics that encourage an interaction that really reflects the type of game. So, for example, Tangle Tower, which I played recently with a couple of really lovely friends, creates this feeling that you're actually searching for clues and delving into stuff. So, just a mechanic that really reflects what the game is about entirely, and it creates this feeling of deducing answers, searching for clues. Like, it gets you into the mystery mindset. Um, Another thing that I find really interesting are games that explore complex concepts in an accessible way. So it can teach stuff like empathy and soft skills. For example, the game Gree, which explores grief. Those are some of my highly recommended games that I think are really worth looking at.
Beautiful, yeah. I mean, we'll be sure to drop some of these games into the chat as well, or in the presentation afterwards, which you guys can check out later. And it's really interesting that I think a lot of people will probably think about video games and say, I want to work on Grand Theft Auto, or I want to work on massive games like Minecraft. Like, how would you define the difference of like indie games development and what the benefits are of working on your own, and maybe what some of the challenges are?
So I think it's really nice to work on your own in terms of getting to grips with what you like. You can explore loads of different things. So I do a bit of art, I do a little bit of the production for my own games, and I do the writing. But it's a little bit lonely. It's quite nice working with other people at the same time. And that's where game jams come in. I highly recommend them. They're a really good way to network and work with some really interesting people as well. I would say that indie development is definitely smaller scale, at least what I'm doing. And the things that I create, I have to work on figuring out the scope, making sure it's not too big. And a good place to start with that is doing little exercises like, oh, I like this game. It's really good, but what if it was doing this? Or what if I took the violence out of it? What would I create then? And thinking about those little thought exercises, they can really help get the ball rolling with how you think about making games.
Yeah. And another question I kind of wanted to ask is, from your perspective, what do you think are really good qualities in a games designer?
I believe a lot of skills are very transferable into the games industry and into games design. Hard skills such as coding, art, they can be learned with time and practice and dedication. But I think the most important thing is learning soft skills, especially when working with other people. So being comfortable working in a team, learning empathy, listening compassionately, being okay and open to making mistakes. That's a really big part of it, because you will be making mistakes, and that's totally okay. That's part of the process. Being sensitive to your teammates' feelings and thoughts is very important, and being good at compromising and advocating for yourself. These are really important things in the industry that I've seen. And there are things, they are harder to learn, I'd say, compared to skills like coding and art, but they're definitely very, very important to learn, and they can take you really far.
Well, whilst we're on the question, actually, if it's all right, I actually want to throw this across to John, because John is probably the most senior here. How long have you worked in the gaming industry?
I think I've worked in games like 13 to 15 years now.
So you must have had a lot of great experience. Like, what do you think? It's great perspective from Robin, but what from your history? What do you think are good skills and qualities in a games designer or games developer in general? To be honest.
Yeah, sure. So Robin, I think, very astutely identified the importance of soft skills, the importance of being a pleasant person to work with, to understanding your own limitations, to understanding that there are things that you don't know, and that's okay. Like, nobody's the finished article. Everybody's always learning. And specifically for a game designer, I think it's incredibly important to be a good communicator, whether that's through a sketch on a bit of paper or words or in an email or words spoken. Game designers typically In bigger teams like what I've worked on, they are trying to distill a new feature or a new thing in a way that a programmer will be able to then interpret those words or those pictures and then implement it with zeros and ones. So I think being a good listener and a good communicator for game design specifically are very useful and important.
Yeah, awesome. So, I'm not sure about everyone at home who's joined us. Maybe you've dabbled in certain programs, or maybe you've just sketched some stuff down, and that's great fun on your own. But I suppose what John and Robin are really getting at is that making games is very much a team effort. It's not like writing a book or even being a director on a film set. It is a group effort. So those skills are really great. So any chance you get, whether it's games or not, to work in a team at school will be really invaluable. So if it's okay, I'll move on to Zakia. And Zakia is an amazing artist and done some amazing work. And I know when I was at school, I loved art. I did art at GCSE level. And I think my parents were a little bit conservative, and they were like, oh, well, are you going to make any money off art? You're going to be poor the rest of your life. Is this a good career choice? But is that still the case? Is it still a valid question to say, can you make a serious career out of art and games?
I think 100% you can make a serious career in art and games. The video game and film industry is really booming at the moment, especially with COVID. There's been a lot more new players and new development, and a lot more companies are moving to remote work. It's important to note that as a medium and as a form, traditionally you would go to art galleries and such and have paintings to kind of view as entertainment. But now the kind of medium has changed to film, games, and other kind of entertainment like VR and such. So the platform is always evolving, and it's important to be very aware of that. And one point I wanted to make is that I thought I came from a background where I thought that like you couldn't do art professionally as a career, but I was far from wrong. And the more I went into the industry, the more I realized there's so much paths out there you can pursue, and there's so much opportunity out there if you just open your eyes to what's around you, really.
Awesome. So, I remember at school, you both probably primary and secondary school, I loved drawing and doing painting. And when I went to university, I did some life drawing, and that was really valuable. But when it comes to video games, can you describe some of the different ways art is needed in video games?
Sure. So with video games, there's different departments. So the art department is split up into several departments. You have the 3D department, which involves prop artists, environment artists, and character artists. I'm a character artist. So I make the characters that you play in video games. But there's also a 2D department, which is for people who just plainly like to draw. And they can get involved in concept art, so they design the characters, the props, and the environments. And then you also have the illustrators who do beautiful like cover art or marketing art that kind of presents or sells the idea of the game. But then there's not only that, there's also design. So if you're interested in things like graphic design or UI or UX, you can help the game in other ways, not just in the immediate what you see on screen. And that kind of leads me to my final point, that there's also managing roles as well. So as you go up and climb up in the ladder, there's like art director and lead. So there's so much roles out there, and it's not just, be a character artist or just be a concept artist, which a lot of people misunderstand. They need to find a role which they both really love to do and that fits their skill set, I think.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to that the reminder that this is a very much a team kind of exercise, making video games, even if you're used to just painting on your own. And there's clearly lots of different ways that you can specialize in video games art. So if it's okay, I would like to bring on a special guest. So Dom, if you could cue up Habiballah. Hi, Habiballah.
Hello.
So I just want to introduce Habiballah because he's a special guest for today. Habiballah recently won, one of the Young Games Designer BAFTA prizes for this amazing games concept. Great idea, great structure. So I want to say big congratulations.
Thank you.
And you've got a really interesting question. You sent a couple through, and I thought they were great questions as well. So would you like to ask your question?
Okay, so my question here is, if you were to turn any kind of video game character into a South Asian character and rename it, what would you do?
Okay, so that can go to, I guess, Zakia or maybe Khaya, if whoever wants to have a stab.
I don't mind answering that question. So this is quite a tricky question, actually. I was thinking about it. I would say, like, I'd be very curious to see a fighting game character like Killick or someone from the kind of Soul Calibur series to be from a South Asian kind of background. Specifically, it'd be really interesting, for example, as well, to see like an Overwatch character, because I love Overwatch at the moment. I've been playing it a lot, and visually it's really inspiring. So it'd be interesting. Although they have characters like Anna and Farah, it'd be interesting to see a Pakistani character there as well. And they have other characters from different kind of South Asian backgrounds. It'd be interesting to see a Pakistani. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that question.
Yeah, great. So Khaya, are you okay to? Have you got an idea of who you might change a famous character ethnicity into South Asian? Oh, okay. So maybe drop it into the chat and I'll read it out. And in the meantime, I would probably say Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series. I do enjoy characters like Dalsim from Street Fighter back in the day. He was still very much a caricature. I don't know if anyone knows anyone like that in real life. All the characters are a bit caricatured. But I think what I would really like to see is just one of those really generic white action heroes that you see in hundreds of different games, just changing the ethnicity up and seeing it and seeing a South Asian person that can be an action character and a romantic lead and a funny person, as they would in any other like action film or even team drama. And Khaya said she would love to have a subcontinent Assassin's Creed character. So I think there was a 2D side-scrolling sumo game by Sumo Digital, but it'd be great to have not just these characters in spin-off games, but as the leading character in the main series game. So thank you for that, for Khaya. And if it's okay, well, if we can put Khaya on screen, Dom, and I'll ask the question, and maybe we'll just have to read it on the chat. But Khaya, if audio permitting, as a South Asian writer, why do you think it's important to see characters like ourselves in video games? Oh, sorry, the audio is not working. So maybe if you drop into the chat. So yeah, if anyone else, I mean, this applies to everyone, to be honest, but if anyone else wants to interject while Khaya drops her opinion, but why is it important to see characters, South Asian characters like yourselves in video games? Anyone want to have a go?
I mean, I don't jumping in to this one. So for me, growing up here in the UK is kind of like white passing. It's never been something that I really thought about until my stepdaughter, who's around 16 now, started playing Overwatch. And she said, there's a character in Overwatch that looks like me, because she's half Asian. She's half Japanese and Thai. And it wasn't until then I was like, it's really important that children growing up see a representation of themselves in video games, right? Because as we've grown up, you know, the older generation of people that play video games forever, it's always been a white guy at the forefront of it. And it's really important to make sure that we have those kind of role models and we see ourselves represented in different media that isn't just, you know, a generic white dude who's doing everything, where, you know, we don't see ourselves in anywhere really. And it's just important for people's, you know, identity to be confirmed that, hey, there are other people like that and they can be in a position of lead, they can be in a position of, you know, the center of a story rather than a side character or like a joke character, like, you know, a character that's been kind of pulled out of stereotype and things like that. So it's extremely important to make sure that they're well represented, not a joke, not a side character, but we can be main characters, by the way, sort of thing. So it's just important that main characters are representative of the human race, because we're not all just white guys.
Yeah. So so Khaya has given a great answer as well. Khaya wrote that personally she hadn't really seen herself growing up, and then when she saw a brown character, it connected much more with her. We have such a rich culture and history, and it's a shame that we haven't been explored and been done justice. Others need to see us too, so that we're humanized rather than just painted into a trope, especially a negative trope that then inspires hatred towards us. So yeah, I mean, some of my research has touched upon this, and hopefully it'll be published in the next few months. But one of the advantages of greater representation is, A, that we can break the stereotype that a lot of people have a gut feeling of when they say Asian people on a plane, they think of a terrorist. And sometimes a lot of that just comes from the media that people see. If they don't know a lot of Asian people, then all they have to rely upon is the media. And you know, when I go and see an Avengers movie, then I see a lot of white faces, which is fine. But we see, you know, white people being billionaires, being gods, you know, just being empowered in lots of different various ways, being funny and being romantic. And it would just be it would be great to see people like ourselves having that possibility and being felt seen, really. So I'll ask another question to Khaya, and we might take a second while she writes it, but because this is a bit more specialized. So Khaya, what different areas in games are writing needed? So, you know, there's probably lots of different areas that need writing. When I teach my students, sometimes they like to write big, long backstories of some JRPG fantasy history of like 20 pages. And I have to skip all that and say, well, how does the game play or whatever it is? Not that there's not a place for that, but I'm sure there's lots of different ways. You know, dialogue is still needed and writing is still needed. So we'll just give Khaya a second to write that. And she says, you're not just confined to prose writing. Unlike comics and movies, there are more than 3 writers in the team. So you can do stuff like character arcs, dialogue, world building, character building, story, lots of different areas. And yeah, how would you describe arcs then, Khaya? What are some examples? So if anyone's played video games, they've probably heard a lot of these, and someone's always got to write them. So Kai says, barks are essentially when you write one-liners for scenarios, such as when you get hit. Maybe, I guess. Well, I'll let Kai speak. Yeah, so probably when you get hit, maybe when a grenade's getting thrown, ow, that hurt, or hey, you there, stop. Examples are, you know, there's lots of different examples where voice actors need to go into a studio, shout lots of little small clips, and they all need to be written by someone. Okay, so I shall move on to Anantha, and this is a little bit of a loaded question, maybe unfair. But Anantha, is programming hard? Is it scary, or is it creative? Is it fun?
Yes, it's all of those things.
Right.
It does tend to have a steep learning curve sometimes. Not anymore with visual scripting, things like Scratch and Game Builder Garage and Mario Maker and Dreams and all of those. But it can take a bit of patience, but it may be like 3 to 6 months of a bit of work. But once you get it, something clicks in your brain, and it's kind of like cycling. Once you know it, you can't really forget it. So you can easily get into that mindset, and that's what it's like.
Right. So I guess, I've dabbled a little bit in programming, and it made my brain hurt a little bit every time I have to do it. But there are some skills that there are probably a lot of kids at home, whether primary or secondary school, have probably dabbled in and maybe thought, wow, what is the point of learning all these theoretical things? But can you tell us how, in what ways do subjects like maths and physics help with programming and help with making a video game?
So maths and physics are essentially everything that happens in video games. So video game characters aren't like us, they don't know what to do. So if someone has to move forward, if you press a button, then the character needs to know how much to move forward, whether they should run forward or walk forward. So all of those things are described by maths and physics. So you say move in this direction with this much, say 100 newtons of force. So every single little step in games involves math and physics. So if you know math and physics, you get a huge step ahead in programming.
So if there are any teachers at home or in class right now, and they've heard the phrase, "Oh, miss, when am I ever going to need this in real life?" Things like vector matrices and things like that, then now they can tell them, well, when you're making a 3D game like Fortnite and you need to figure out where a bullet starts, where it ends up, and when it hits, that's where maths and physics all help with programming. Yeah. So we've got another question from Habiballah. Do you want to ask your second question? Habiballah, so I think you had a question to Anantha and possibly to Robin as well, let's say. Oh, okay. So I'm not sure if we can hear him. So he did send a great second question, so I'll read that out until his audio works. But Habiballah's question was, what inspired you to be a game designer? So Anantha?
So when I was little, I used to make games on paper, board games the old-fashioned way. Me and my granddad used to sit together and use seeds for pawns. And I don't know if anyone knows what cowrie shells are. They're like these shells that you get with Indian games. They're really old-fashioned. But if you throw them, they either land upside down or right side up. So that's what we used to use as dice. So using things like that, I used to make games as a kid. And from there on, I've just been using things like Game Maker, small little softwares that I can create my own things in, RPG Maker, things like that. And then now I'm here with Unreal Engine. So yeah, that's what inspired me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. So anyone at home, if you played Monopoly, if you played any kind of board games, then that's a really great, or even Snakes and Ladders, that's a really great opportunity to look at the board and think, well, where do I start? Where am I meant to end up? What are the things I have to do, which are what we would call mechanics? And then once you've made your own, maybe you can start to change a few things. And that's a really great basis, a great starting exercise for any games designer to understand what mechanics are and objectives and travel mechanics without worrying about a big scary piece of software or engines before you get into that. Habiballah, can we hear you again?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, do you want to say your same question to Robin then, instead of me putting words into your mouth?
Okay. What inspired you to be a game designer?
So the main thing that got me into game design was I had stories I wanted to tell, and I found games to be the best medium to do that. It's a very interactive way to teach people very complicated things and explain very complicated feelings. And I found games to be the best way to do that. And there's a lot of very accessible ways to make games nowadays. For example, there's Bitsy. Unity has extensions called Fungus and Bolt. And there's a lot of free assets online and assets that you can buy that can help you make games, and then it will help you lead your own journey and lead into what you'd like to make.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So the next couple of panelists I wanted to invite on, because there's another side to games development, which is really about making sure that games are discovered and that games can be built in a kind of a successful environment. And that kind of covers both internally, production and project management, but also marketing and promotion. So, Charlotte, in terms of your two roles here, why is marketing important? If we make a great game, surely everyone's just going to notice it and flock to it because it's amazing.
I wish it worked like that. But if you don't know it exists, then you don't know that it's going to be great, right? So a lot of the things that we do marketing wise is to make sure that when we are making a game, we can go, hey, by the way, this is going to be really cool. And then, that's when people kind of spread it by word of mouth after that. But you don't know it's happening unless somebody tells you that it's happening. And that's kind of what we do, like a really, basic sense. We talk to a lot of external companies to make sure that they will write articles or, content creators that will either stream the game or make YouTube videos or whatever, and people that review the game are obviously really important. So there's a lot of things that we actually do to make sure that people know about the game. Even working at a company like SEGA, it's still very important that we talk about our games, while obviously it's a lot easier for our games to be discovered because everybody knows who Sonic is and whatnot. It's still very important that we make sure that people know what's coming out or that we have something new. And marketing is obviously extremely important for an indie studio to make sure that they don't get drowned out by the noise of everything else happening. So having a good marketing person on an indie team, so a small company, is extremely important to make sure that your product is out there and people know what's happening with it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of games out there. If anyone's had a look on Steam, if everyone scroll down on the Xbox Marketplace, then you'll know that it's like a flood of like constantly more and more games. So being able to find them is really important. So really there is a side to games development that if you're interested in business and marketing, that you can still be involved in the production and development and promotion of games as well. But in terms of streaming as well, what do you think are the skills or requirements to build a good starter streaming setup and to kind of build an audience or community around that channel?
I think the most important thing about being a streamer is not to have the most expensive fancy gear. It's not to have silly things like this RGB microphone. That's not going to make my stream any better. And it looks cool and it sounds cool, but it's not going to make your personality come out better. The most important thing when you're streaming is that you are yourself and you are happy doing it. I can't explain the amount of times that I've gone to somebody else's stream and they're not playing a game that they don't enjoy, and it's so clear that they're not having fun. When you're streaming, the most important thing is to make sure that you're enjoying yourself, because if you come across like you're not, then people aren't really going to stay in and watch and hang out. It's important that you do something you enjoy, that you're comfortable talking to nobody, because at the start there might not be somebody there. So you have to get into the habit of kind of talking to yourself. And I think that's the most difficult thing, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable just talking to no one, and it can be quite hard to begin, because it's quite daunting to talk to an audience of no one. But once you start doing that, once you start getting used to it, that's when your audience kind of grows. And it can take a long time. There are people that obviously have been streaming for a long time and they still have a small audience, but as long as you're enjoying yourself, that's the most important thing.
Cool. And also, so John, I wanted to invite you as well, because you've got quite a lot of experience in terms of production. So your title is senior producer. What does a producer do, and what's the difference between a producer or a project manager?
Sure. So the job of a producer is, honestly, it varies wildly from company to company and from team to team. You have to be really flexible and kind of open-minded about what a certain team's needs are. For example, you might be overseeing delivery of an entire game or with 50 people, or you might just be looking after 10 people who are focusing just on making tools that, I don't know, do something with our assets or something like that. But I think the general overall way to sum it up is that you're basically trying to ensure that the work that needs to get done gets done. If it can't get done, making sure, or looking at ways that it could get done alternatively, and also making sure that anybody who expects it to get done is informed, and managing those expectations. So supporting developers, working on plans to ensure things can get done. If they can't, how can you address it? Do you need to hire more people? Do you need to scale back the number of things you're going to deliver? It can be anything. I mean, there's some days I've been getting a time cost for an entire feature, speaking to lead programmers, speaking to lead artists about how long something's going to take. And then, and this wouldn't be true of all companies, 5 minutes later, I'm making phone calls to get a carpet cleaner to come in so that, we can move offices without having to pay a landlord fee or something like that. Or you might be ordering lunch for people if they need it, if they want to work over lunch or something. It can be many, many different things. And the way I approach it is just to be as flexible as possible, because I can't program, can't draw, I can't write. So just trying to add value however you can to the team in whatever way they need.
So that's a really good point. If you don't feel like you're the world's best artist, or you're brilliant at maths and programming, then there's still a really great role, particularly if you are good with people and good at organization. What kind of person do you think makes a good producer then?
Wow. I think you have to be a good listener, and you have to have good sort of emotional intelligence in terms of understanding people's needs and the different motivations that people bring to every conversation. Everyone in this call has their own motivations for being in it. When you go to work, you have your own motivations for doing that. And by understanding people's needs and motivations for, why do they want a feature to be a certain way? Why do they want a character to have purple hair, et cetera, then you can go a long way to basically getting to a consensus point where everyone's in agreement about what you want to do and how you want to do it and how many people need to do it. I think trying to listen and understand other people as much as possible.
So I think someone mentioned earlier, maybe it was Robin, about game jams. If there are any games jams running, then is that a good practice opportunity for any maybe secondary or sixth form kids to try and dabble in a producer role, would you say?
So I have never personally been involved in a game jam that wasn't inside a company. At Ubisoft, I used to do them a few times. But from my experience within Ubisoft doing game jams, so I joined the industry first as tech support in a call center, and then I moved to testing before going through design and then production. And as a tester, I was basically like a producer for mini projects, and we ended up winning little awards. Our little demos that we put together, won a few awards within the company and things like that. So I think that yes, if you can go along and be useful in some way, then yeah, absolutely go for it. It's all good experience. Learn from your mistakes, and if you go to a game jam and it doesn't go well, then there'll be mistakes there that you can learn from the next time you are introduced to a team of people who you might be able to help.
Awesome. So I think we're running out of time right now for the 45 minutes. I'm not sure if we can stick around a little bit longer, Dom. If so, we'll probably have a look at the comment section and see if we've got time for any questions. So if people need to jump out, go back to class. Thank you for attending, and if anyone wants to stick around, you're welcome to. If you signed up via Eventbrite, then we'll send these slides and share this video recording a little bit longer. So yeah, if you have a little bit more time, we'll have a look in the comments, and panelists, you're welcome to pick out any questions as well, your answer. Sajidul says, you're interested in spending a few grand on an intensive 6-month animation course with a view to getting into gaming or films. Is this a good route? Potentially. I teach at university, and that can be a 3-year course. It can be a 1-year master's. So, depending on which government is in power and who charges you what fees, then that can be a lot of money. Or as I got paid to go to do my master's animation. So unfortunately, that was very lucky for me, but those times have passed. So I think have a look at the courses and see which one works for you. There are some courses online that you can do. And even if it's a few hundred or a couple of grand, that may still be cheaper than university. But doing them online, I think it can be a lot more demanding. Like, you need to be really disciplined. If you've got a full-time or a part-time job, that can drag things out and make it a lot more demanding. And the advantage of going to do a master's or go to university is you've got all the time focused to do that. You've got friends, peers to learn from. You've got opportunity of group exercises. So there's pros and cons. If you're doing one of the online courses, then as long as you're dedicated and it's a reputable course, and there are a few out there, I think iAnimate and a few others, then have a look and see what works for you. So Fadia says, which software would you use to design characters and games, and what's the best way to get started on game designing? So maybe Zakia and Robin, or maybe Anantha might want to chip in.
Sure, I could take that question as well. I guess in terms of software you'd use to design characters, if you're specifically visually designing them, good old Photoshop is always your best friend for that. I can't recommend it any strongly. I would say as well, if you are interested in kind of the production side of characters as well, so actually making the character, don't be shy of using ZBrush or Maya and kind of getting. You don't have to necessarily be an expert at those tools, because there's people like character artists who produce those characters. But just being aware of the tool and its limitations and stuff like that is really fundamental when it comes to the design process, because there's been countless times where I've had to make alterations to concepts and using my concept art skills in order to kind of have the final product produced.
Yeah, and we can share some resources after this in the PowerPoint and provide some links. But Anantha and Robin, is there any free software that you recommend to get started on games design or games development? From a starter to an intermediate level.
I highly recommend Unity because it has some tutorials in it itself. It also has the visual scripting systems, Fungus and Bolt, which you can download, which can help you learn kind of the logic behind programming, which is how I started in Unity. Also, Bitsy is very good for what I've seen narrative games, not just narrative games, just very emotionally led games. And I really like seeing the stuff that comes out of that community as well. Highly recommend that. And even just designing games on paper, like board games or RPGs, tabletop RPGs could be really good. Designing them on paper and playing them with friends to just test out what you like, what works well for you. That's also a very good idea too.
Okay, and actually, Khaya, I don't know if your audio is working again. Do you want to have another go? Oh, it's still a little bit choppy, but yeah, Khaya answered a really great question you saw in the chat again from Fadia about, is it more difficult to get a job in this field if you're in Pakistan? So Khaya says networking is more difficult, yes, because we aren't as visible. A lot of opportunities become available when you network the right way. So definitely attend conferences virtually, which we shall be used to now. Be active on Twitter, etc. That being said, Pakistan itself has a very active gaming industry with companies like We Are Play, Quixel, Frag Games, AppTech, etc. So that's really interesting. Please follow Khaya on Twitter as well. I think she did a great talk at GDC that I think is available for free on YouTube, so you can hear her actual voice instead of mine. Let's see what else. So I think Mona asked the same question. I have a game idea. How would I go about networking developers to create it? Does anyone want to jump in with that one? I've got a great idea. Just make it.
So, I mean, I can kind of, I guess, talk on part of it, how you approach people. The best thing for you to do is to make sure that you have a pitch deck, which is your idea fleshed out, that you have kind of a start to end, exactly what you're looking for and exactly what you need. And then you can find companies that do publishing for smaller companies, like Curve, for example, if you've already got a team together. If not, it's a case of you just got to look for it. Nobody will do. You need to make sure that you've got a budget. If you've got a team of people, learn it yourself, maybe. It's just trying to find the people that will kind of either, join you to make a team to then go to somebody that can publish it, or try and get a job as a games designer. It's quite difficult to kind of go, hey, I've got an idea. Can you now develop it for me? If you don't work at a company without already having kind of a basis for somebody to then give you the funds to do it. It's going to be a process, but it's not impossible. It's just going to take quite a while. And you just need to be prepared that it's not going to be you turning up to a company going, hey, my idea is great, because we get ideas in all the time. So you need to make sure that it's fleshed out, that it's clear and concise, and that you have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess ideas are cheap. It's easy to write stuff down, but making them is where the hard work comes in. And the great advantage for young folk today is there are more tools, more free tools, and more accessible tools than ever. Often when I teach and there's a short class and my students have to make something, I say I don't even mind if it's made in Mario Maker or if it's Portal to a level editor. If it's a very good project, then use whatever tools you need, and then you can kind of create a proof of concept that you could take to other people to create. So we've also got April Wheeler in the from YouTube asking, probably Zakia, as a character designer, can you make your own characters based on your own design, or do you have to follow somebody else's ideas? Which is an interesting question.
I think that's a very valid question. It's important to distinguish the separation between personal work and professional work. So when you're doing personal work, it's work for your portfolio or for yourself, for your own enjoyment. And that kind of work, you can basically go crazy to some limits. Obviously, there's limitations technically and artistically and according to trends. But of course, you can have your own spec of what you want to design and how you want it to feel and kind of what kind of culture you want to bring to it. But I will say when you're working at a company, the situation's a lot different. You have to, if you're designing a character, you have to follow kind of a spec sheet or specification according to a design bible of kind of how the established kind of aesthetics are. But if you're kind of higher up, I guess, a senior level, you actually have a little bit more say in the company and they trust you, then you can have a chance to add your own ideas. So it's not necessarily that you can't have any say at all or that you can have all the say. It's kind of flexible depending on your position and kind of your credibility within the company, I'd say.
Yeah, so hopefully even working within existing, design, that there's still within constraints, there's still a lot of creativity. So I think we've got time for one more question from Dibs20, which is an interesting one. And I guess we'll open this to anyone. Has anyone been the lone South Asian in their company team? And if so, what was your experience like? Any pros and cons anyone is willing to share? So as I said, there's only a couple of percentage of people, in the UK. Instead of 7% or more, it's more like 2%. So there's probably quite likely. Does anyone want to comment on that or comment in the chat, Khaya?
As far as the question of being like a lone Asian or being like the only South Asian in a company, I would say I definitely had that experience several times, and I can say it can be quite daunting, and it can be kind of sometimes cultural differences, very minor ones. But I think the main thing is being very empathetic and being very open to them, and being really good at communication. So being able to communicate your needs, such as if you are Muslim and you need to pray, then just establishing that right at the start that you might have requirements to go pray and such. And all the companies I've been at have been, mashallah, have been really accommodating to me. And actually, when I made them aware of the needs I had, they have been very responsive in order to kind of share posts about it, or kind of make it more aware within the company of these needs. So I'd say it is very challenging when you start off, but if you are very confident and you communicate your needs, then companies are actually really open to listening to what you have to say.
Yeah, that was a really great question. So I think, thank you, Dibs20. If you want to DM at Pock in Play, then I think we as a little group of panelists agreed that that was a really good question. So we can send you a code for Raji as well. So I'll just start to wrap this up, because I know some of you may have other commitments to go to. So thank you for the questions, and from myself and Pock in Play. Thanks to all of our panelists for sparing their valuable working or holiday time or caravan time, whichever place you're in. Thanks to Jasveer at South Asian History Heritage Month for our use of their StreamYard platform. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching this across whichever platform suits you. Thanks to BAFTA and Habiballah for the great questions. And most of all, thanks to those who may have taken their last day of school or the first day or week of holiday to join us. Okay, so please watch out in your inbox if you've signed up to Eventbrite. We shall send you a copy of the slide with a full list of resources of everything you need from each different discipline. A big thank you from me and a big thank you from our panelists. And keep an eye out on the Pock in Play Twitter feed. I will be issuing a 100 South Asian games kind of list of people to watch, and a reading list in future. But yeah, a really big thank you to everyone for joining. It's always great to see more brown faces, in person, in chat, whichever. I really appreciate all of you turning up and sharing your wisdom and knowledge.
Thanks, Satish.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Thank you. It's been
All right.
Best of luck.
Cheers, folks.
Best of
And
luck to everyone watching it.
if you've got any questions, just drop a message to Pock in Play and we'll do our best to answer them. Okay, thank you, and have a great day, evening, wherever you're watching us. And hopefully we'll do something like this again sometime in the future. Cheers.
Cheers all.